everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog, our YouTube channel, and our newsletter, and our great sponsors, Italy Rooting, Phil Italy, and Abitativa Casa. And today I have a great guest, Lorraine LoRusso. So welcome, Lorraine. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our talk today.
That's great. That's great. And I know you have some great stories. What got you started researching the family?
Well, it was about 10, probably 15 years ago now that my oldest sister was interested in finding out where our family was from because we had an idea, but we didn't know exactly where. Um, my grandparents had passed away and there was really nobody to ask. So she started researching. She volunteered at the National Records Archive in Belmont, Massachusetts. And she was able to dig up a lot of information, ship records, naturalization papers. So it started there. And then she had gathered a lot of information and put it aside. And when she became ill, I kind of took over. I was looking for her papers and found the information, and I took over from there. So about 10 years I've been working on it. We we found out where our grandparents were from, each of the communes in Italy. And we also found out that we had some family there. So I knew there was some, but with the aging of the people on my side of the family, we lost contact. I knew there was somebody my grandfather used to write to, but as teenagers and young adults, we didn't really have much interest in it, like many people. And so yeah, we contacted a company that is based in Italy, and they helped us find our um, family. So yeah, it was an amazing time, exciting, and we really enjoyed finding our cousins.
Yeah, isn't that exciting to find the cousins there?
It is, it is. It really, we, the first attempt I made was with one company, and I just went there blindly once we knew the town, and I drove around with him as my interpreter. And we came upon some people who could have been relatives, but we weren't really sure. And I didn't have a lot of time. I was only there one day. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I contacted another company, set up an appointment with them, gave them all the information that I had at that point. I accumulated quite a bit. And then they went off and went to the town. They asked a lot of questions of people. They found one woman at the gas station who said, I know the family you're talking about. They live at such and such a place. He went there, confirmed it was them, and then he contacted me to let me know he had found my cousins.
Wow, that's super. That's fantastic. So what towns are they from?
They're from a town. We originally thought they were from a hilltop town called Trevico, and that's in southern Italy in the province of Avellino. But come to find out, Trevico's kind of, they split it off, and another town evolved in the valley called Vallesaccarda. And it's halfway between Naples and Foggia, so inland. And they found I found all kinds of records, birth records, marriage records for each of the parents, grandparents, and we found all kinds of information going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. So now the cousins that you found, did they know that they had family in Italy, or was it a surprise to them?
Um, they knew that they had cousins in
I
the
should have said America, but
in the States. They knew they
yeah.
had cousins in the States, but where my grandfather was writing to them, once he stopped because he had passed away, he stopped writing. They lost contact, so they weren't sure who was left here. Um, they when I went to see them, amazingly, I mentioned my grandfather. I showed him pictures. One of the gentlemen who was in the room, he said, "I'll be right back." He ran home. He came back. He had on a little piece of paper my grandfather's address when he first arrived in the north end of Boston. When that happened, it was 1920. So the address was a good 80 years old, 90 years old, and they had kept it in the family
Wow,
all
that's
those
something.
years.
Yeah. So how old was he when he got to the North End?
My grandfather was 32.
So so
And
he was pretty old when he
he
got
was
there. Yeah.
older. Yeah, he was older. He had just finished serving in the Italian army. He had seen enough of the war, and he found with his brother a way to come to the States in 1914. And it was just the start of World War One, and he came to the States, and they worked for about a year. And then Italy, interestingly enough, Italy called back all of its sons and said, "Come back to Italy and help us fight this war." And that was where the family split. My grandfather didn't want anything to do with war. He had seen enough of death and destruction. His brother was younger and missed his family, and he went back to Italy at that point. So his brother went back to Italy, and my grandfather stayed here. Um, my grandfather helped build New York City. He was a bricklayer, cement worker, and laid a lot of the buildings, brick buildings, cement sidewalks in New York City with many other Italian immigrants. And he made his way to Boston. And so they wrote back and forth. The family split at that point, and um, my grandfather found a place to live in Boston on Margaret Street in the North End. And his brother went back to Vallesaccarda, and he raised a family there. And they conversed throughout the years. They wrote letters back and forth. My grandfather never went back to Italy. He wanted to leave the past behind. He made an effort to integrate into American society, which didn't always go smoothly. Both my grandparents on my father's side did not speak English. Um, they were not literate in Italian either. They never went to school when they were in Italy, which was common in the South, many families. And so they were in farming when they were there, tenant farming. So they lived with a family who owned the land, and they worked for him. But when they came here to the United States, they settled in Boston, Massachusetts, and found a job that he could do. He was a chauffeur. And my grandmother stayed at home. She had four sons. They had all gone to war, and one of them did not return. Uh, he was killed in action in France. Um, my mother's side of the family was from San Sozio, which is about 5 miles from Vallesaccarda. And my grandmother that lived there, um, she came to America when she was 17. My grandfather, who lived there, he came to America in his 30s. He was about 33. He was already married. He married in Italy, and he came to America and settled in West Virginia, became a coal miner, didn't like that line of work at all, and found some family of relatives that he could live with in Boston. And that's how my grandparents all met up. So all four of them lived in the North End. And interestingly, my maternal grandparents lived at the bottom of Margaret Street, number 5. And my maternal grandparents lived at the top of Margaret Street at number 26 when they both moved, or all grandparents moved to Boston. They lived on the same street. My mother and father were about 6 months apart in age, my mother being older. She was born in March. My father was born in October. They were lifelong friends, living on the same street, playing in the street together. They went to the same school. My mother went to vocational school, North Bennett Street Vocational School in the North End to learn what we call home economics, how to keep a house, cooking, cleaning, all of those, how to do clothes. And she got a job at a factory in Boston, right down the street from where she lived, sewing men's army pants for the World War II. She used to sew all the pockets into the pants, and then it was piecemeal. So she would do pockets all day, and she would do hems all day, and they'd pass it on to the next person. The next person would sew the next piece of, belt loops, whatever had to be done. My father went on to Boston English High School and graduated high school, and then got a job for Firestone. But when the war opened in December 1942, the U.S. was dragged into World War II, and my father enlisted. My mother and father were engaged to be married. They married on September 10th, 1944, during the war, on one of his leaves. But unbeknownst to them, 3 days before they got married, his brother was killed in action. And 20 days after they got married, her brother was killed in action. So they have a lot of things in common, both good and not so good. But they lived the rest of their lives together, happily married. My father was so devoted, and they raised 4 of us. So I've always felt this obligation to find out, where are my cousins? What happened to that family? And that drove me to ask more questions and try to find some answers. And I did. I was really pleased. In 2016, I got my Italian citizenship. So I was very pleased with that I finally kind of recognized my grandfather for his effort coming to America, starting a new life. And I felt like, sorry, I'm a little emotional. I felt like I was paying him back, or recognizing what he did for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. And don't worry, I understand the whole emotional thing.
Yeah.
When I was over there, I was crying all the time. My wife said, "You got to stop crying." But it's interesting that you mentioned, they was sewing right down the street and everything. Because I grew up, in New York City, and up until I guess the 80s or something like that. They were still making clothes there and everything like that. It's so sad that all of these things are gone now. But I'm interested in, when did your grandparents pass away? Because the reason I ask is I was close with Anthony Riccio, who interviewed a lot of people in the North End, in the early 70s. And it's just, the stuff that he did is just a great testimony to the people that came over.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before. traveling with a scheduled group, or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
It's nice to have those records. I I've been finding more and more information online too about, different prejudices against the Italians when they came to this country. And um, I, I don't think it was very easy for them because they didn't speak English. But when my parents went to school, they obviously were English speaking and came home, and we did try to teach them a little bit. My grandparents passed away. My grandfather actually um, passed away in tomorrow would make 1967. So uh 50 years ago, 50, almost 50, 60
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah, almost 60 now. Yeah.
60 years ago. And my grandmother was in the 1970s. They were not in good health. They never had access to any kind of health care that was of any quality.
But your grandmother, she still lived in the North End at that time, or she had moved
No,
over there?
when my uncle, their son, uh, was killed in action in France, Anthony LoRusso. He has a plaque on Margaret Street at the bottom of the hill, and Anthony Carlito has a plaque at the top of the hill on Margaret Street. Um, when he died, he was buried in France, and it took them 4 years of letter writing to the U.S. Army and to the people in France to retrieve his body. And they were able to exhume his body and ship it back here to the U.S. And he's now buried peacefully at Forest Hills Cemetery in Rosendale. But uh, once that happened, the Army pays a death benefit, and my parents had all been working, so they pooled their money and they bought a house in Somerville, Massachusetts, about 1948, and they lived out their lives there. So they were frequently, I mean, it was only 5 miles to uh, Boston. They were frequently in the North End. They went to church there. They shopped at Haymarket. They did all their business there. The bank was there. Um, so they were there very frequently. Um, and then once the grandchildren came, they were more staying at home, taking care of the kids. They watched us grow. There was an elementary school right across the street from where we grew up, and they used to watch us out the window to make sure we crossed the street and come home safely. In those days, there was no worries. Um, so yeah, they lived their lives out in Somerville.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, well, that started happening. People started going to the suburbs and all of that. So now have you done DNA at all?
I did, yeah, Ancestry. I did my DNA, but I can't get anybody in my family to do it.
I know. I have some cousins who did it. My brother and sister want to do it. I wish I had asked my mother to do it.
Mm.
And the two trips to Italy, I not the first one because I didn't think about it, but the second one I said I should bring some test kits there and see if I could get some people to do it because they don't do DNA over there. They're not.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I wish I had done it. I still have it at the back of my head to do it, but
That's right. So you
eh,
would get a kit and bring it with you to Italy and
yeah,
come.
bring a kit, bring it with you, and then I think you have enough time to probably ship it. I know there's some sort of limitation on it. Um, of course, because you know what they say, the more people that do it. I actually did it with Living DNA also when they started up because they're based in Europe, and I figured, well,
Mm.
maybe I'll get more hits, but no, they don't do it.
Oh, that's a good
Very
idea.
few.
That's a good idea. I like that. I might do that next time I go.
Yeah, because again, like I said, they say the more samples that you have, the better it works. I mean, I found a few distant ones through a living DNA, but not that many. And my wife, on the other hand, her father's from Puerto Rico, and she's got tens of thousands of cousins from Puerto Rico. I mean, I think every Puerto Rican person in the United States has done a DNA test.
They're all related.
Oh, she's got so many. It's like, yeah, and even with living DNA, she has a lot more than me. That's for sure.
Huh.
Uh, and so now, when doing the research, was there anything that you found that was like, surprising or amazing or?
Um, well, uh, um, in doing the research for, I think the best story was when, how the family split. That really solved a lot of the issues I had with, well, if they both came to the US, why did he go back? That was a major question in my head. And once I found that out, I also was able to ask the family in Italy a lot of questions about the history because when I went there, you must know Italian. When a house falls down because of an earthquake or is destroyed somehow, they don't take that house and rebuild it like we would in the US. They just build beside it, at least in this town that I was in. And and so they still have my grandfather's house, although it had been demolished with earthquakes. It was still there. Part of the walls were there. It was all stone. And so my cousin, my first cousin, he told me that what they used to do was live in this hillside, and all of the farmland was in the valley. So they would walk down the hill to the farms, do their farming for the day, and then they would find a stone um, in the farm and carry it up the hill to where they wanted to build a house. So over time, every time you go down, do your farming, bring a stone back, there'd be 5, 10, 15 people bringing stones back and they'd put them in a pile. And then they would stop building the house. So over time, all of these stones would make its way back up the hill where they wanted to build the house. And so he said that's the way they built my grandfather's house with his family. My grandfather, his brother, parents, they were all farmers, and they had this little patch of land that um, the owner had, and they allowed them to build a house in this clearing. And it was just a very simple stone house. You couldn't even imagine how simple it was, but it was a house they lived in. So we uncovered little stories like that. The fact that they had kept, even though my grandfather was long gone, they kept his address. That attachment to somebody in the U.S. they didn't know was this address that they had. I also found out that they were good repair mechanics. They knew cars inside and out. They wanted to know what kind of car I drove. They drove Mercedes. They thought that was the best car in the world. So they could take an engine apart, put it back together. They had farms, but not as big as in the past. They had a vegetable patch. They had some fruit trees. And the amazing thing about that is they eat in season. So whatever they have either stored or was available in the vegetable patch is what we had for dinner, which I found amazing because after about a week there, 4 or 5 days that I spent with them, I felt totally different not eating all that processed food. It was so, I said, it's subtle, but I really feel a difference. All their food was fresh. All the women were in the kitchen making handmade pasta for us to eat at lunch and dinner. Their pizzas were handmade. They had rabbits, chickens, which they would make these kind of fillets, chicken fillets or rabbit fillets for meat and any vegetables. He had, when I went last March, he had onions already in the ground, and apricots were coming out. He had a huge bundle of hazelnuts that they would eat. Um, but everything handmade, everything from the ground. Very little. They would go in the morning to get their coffee at the local cafe. They call it a bar,
Yeah.
but everything else was made in the house.
I know that's the thing that I found amazing, and they're so matter of fact about it. Like, doesn't
Mm,
everybody do this? We when we went to the town and everything was
yeah,
homemade, the ham and the cheese and all that kind of stuff.
everything. Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it is different. There's uh, and even when they make pastas and stuff like that, they make it very simple. There's only a few ingredients that they put in
Mhm.
there. It's not like here with the whole 15, 20 different things.
No, no, they had and that's the thing. Their pastas were flour, water, and an egg, and that's what we'd eat. They'd make different shapes, different textures, but it was it was very simple. There's nothing, contrast that to the north where it's a lot. You might get raviolis, you might get a stuffed. Although they did do a stuffed, like a pierogi, Polish pierogi, they used to stuff like a ravioli, but they didn't call it a ravioli, and I don't recall the name of it. But they did have one stuffed one that they did when I was there. They were getting ready for Easter, so they were doing a little bit fancier.
Yeah, this year, I mean, we don't have a lot of space for a, a big giant garden, but this year I planted some, you know, San Marzano tomatoes and plum tomatoes and the eggplant, and I peeled them and then uh put them in the blender and then and froze them, but it tastes different.
Yeah,
It tastes
yeah,
different. It doesn't taste
for
like it
sure.
came out of a can, that's for sure. It's
No,
just fresh, it's got a fresh taste to it.
and it's funny you say it because yes, it does taste different, and we think it should taste like what we bought in the can, but no, it should be the gold standard is the fresh, and everything should try to imitate that. But we try hard to, oh, we had that terrific pasta dish at, Olive Garden. I want to make it at home. No, 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 no. That's not the gold standard. The gold standard is home cooking.
My wife she asked for cheese on the seafood pasta, and the guy flipped out. She said, I just wanted to see what he would do. I thought we were going to get thrown out of the restaurant, but
Yeah, and Italians don't apologize for that.
no,
They're like,
no.
you don't get it. Sorry. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it was no cheese, no cheese.
salad dressing that you get oil and vinegar. You don't get Russian ranch, blue cheese, and they don't care. It's like you get olive oil and vinegar. You can, put a little salt and pepper in if you like, and that's it. So,
And
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 they
we
don't,
were I when we were in Bari, we got this the antipasta, like the ham and cheese and all of that. And it tastes nothing like the crap we have here. I mean,
mm,
it's so good. It's just
yeah,
so good.
very, very fresh, and no preservatives. It's just really different. And
Well, and then
that,
and they don't eat like one guy he explained to me. He said, "You see the fruit stand?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said he doesn't need a refrigerator. He gets
mm,
everything that morning. He
mhm,
sells it. The next day he goes and gets more.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's really, it's very different. And, it was probably like that here at one point, and then, food industry took over, and now we end up with highly processed food with lots of preservatives.
Well, even when we were growing up, you couldn't get everything all year round.
No, no, that's true. That's true.
The thing that flips us out is the milk. Remember, milk used to last 2, 3 days, right? Now it
Mm-hmm,
lasts forever. It tastes awful.
mm-hmm.
Who knows what it's doing to our insides? I guess for us it doesn't matter that much anymore. But
No, my father was a milkman for a little while, and he used to be one of those guys who'd go door to door and deliver the milk. And um, and he'd bring home at only at Christmas time. They allowed him to bring home an extra gallon of milk and an extra gallon of eggnog, but it was, it was processed. It wasn't fresh. So, but there, it's just so different with, everybody going to the market that morning, buying what you need to make dinner, and taking care of it. And it's not like you have to travel 10 miles. I mean, the villages all have shops right there. It's not a long distance to travel. I mean, when we lived in Somerville, my mother did all of her food shopping at Haymarket Square in Boston in the North End. And she would go, take me with her. We'd go and do all of our shopping. She'd finish with all of her friends, visiting her friends and that was still living there. We'd have lunch with one of her friends who owned a sub shop, so she'd make us subs for lunch, and then we'd go home and we'd carry 3 or 4 of those leather shopping bags full of fruits and vegetables and sometimes meats, and we'd carry them home on the train back to our place. But she did this every Saturday. It wasn't once a month now. You don't have the big deep freezer chests that you could freeze stuff. We'd go every week and take the train in and take the train back. It was just something you did. It's not, anything unusual
Yeah, well,
nowadays.
remember that the old refrigerators that, the freezer was like this, was small,
Yeah.
and what'd you have in there? Like orange juice, maybe, stuff like
Yeah. Yeah. And the refrigerators in Italy are still small. You won't find a
Yeah.
20 or 30 square cubic foot refrigerator. They're very small. They're like probably equivalent to I would say 5 to 7, maybe 10 cubic feet, and that's it. It's very small, but it's all they need. That's all they need.
Yeah, no, because like you were saying that, everything is fresh. And even, the other thing that we found different, like we have an Italian bakery. We could walk there. We're lucky. But even the pastries over there, they're much more subtle. They're not as sweet. Um, um, they're more flaky. So even the stuff that you used to over here, when you get it over there, it's a different taste because they don't put tons and tons of sugar in everything.
No, no, they don't. It's yeah, it's totally, totally different.
I'm getting hungry now.
I am too. And and even the espresso,
Oh, Naples has the best espresso. I don't care
oh,
what anybody says. They have the best coffee.
here, if I get an espresso, I am high as a kite with the caffeine. I'm like jittery, jumping around. There, when I have one, it's just a nice lift. It doesn't get me like overstimulated. So again, another difference. I don't know what the coffee beans are that they use, but even their espresso is much nicer.
Yeah, maybe it's just maybe it's the way the way they do the beans or something like that, the way they roast them or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we did a couple of trips to the south the last couple of years, and the next year we're gonna go to the north because we've never been to Florence or Venice or any of those
Oh, okay.
places. So,
Okay.
uh, as much as we love the South, because that's where we're basically from, um, we kind of feel we have. I was to Milan a couple of times for work. Um, but that's like being in New York, Milan.
I tried the first time I went to Italy was in 2016 when I got my citizenship. I got my passport. I wanted to use it, so I went to Italy for the first time, um, and I took a tour. I did a Perillo tour, and they're out of New Jersey. I went, uh, landed in Rome. We went to Naples, Sorrento, Pompeii, Venice, and Florence. And it was just like a survey of all the big cities. I wanted to see what it was about. And then I thought I'll take some notes, mental notes, and figure out where I want to go back and see more of. But I never got, we were supposed to, on our itinerary, we were supposed to go to Pisa, and we never made it there. The tour guide canceled it. So I need to go back to Pisa. I tried to go to Milan in March, but that didn't work out. I want to go see the Last Supper, the painting. Uh, but Florence had a very different feel than Rome. Rome is, I feel, it's like more historic. There's a lot of history, ancient buildings. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Florence was more, you can feel the Renaissance vibe. Um, Florence had, the Uffizi Gallery was beautiful. Um, the river was really pretty. There's lots of overlooks to the Duomo from the other side of the river, and it was really pretty too. Venice, Venice, we were only there for a quick day. We had lunch at a restaurant. We did a gondola ride, and 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 it was is a very unique city, very unique. Um, and I like the way they told us about the history of Venice with, putting building the whole city on these ancient pilings, tree trunks, and the um, uh, canals that go through all of um, from the largest river to the smallest river to the smallest canal, and how they maintain them. So it's very, very, very unique. Of course, the glass blowing at Murano, we went to a demonstration and I got these beautiful glass goblets, hand painted in gold and platinum. They're beautiful. I don't use them. They're just for I consider them a work of art. And so we were exposed to that. And Venice had a lot of sites too. Was it Saint
Saint
Marco
Saint
the
Mark Saint yeah, Saint Mark's or Saint Marco, yeah.
Saint Mark's the church is there, the Bridge of Sighs. There's a lot of sights to be seen there too.
Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna spend like a few days in Milan, and they take, trips from there, and then a few days in Bologna and take trips from there, and
Oh, I've
a
heard
few
that's
days in
pretty too.
Florence and
Yeah.
take trips from there. I mean, I have ancestors from Florence and places up there going back like 1,000 years. So,
Oh.
I'm gonna haven't told my wife yet, but I'm gonna sneak in some of those castles when we're there. The one I really want to go to is um the D'Este castle, because that's supposed to be really, really pretty neat. Mantua is supposed to be a really nice place, but uh yeah, so we're interested, because the South, as you know, is drier than the North, and the food is different. So it should be interesting to get a different spin on it. Our first trip was almost 30 years ago now, but I didn't know anything. So we just went to Rome for a couple of days, and then we spent a week in Sorrento, which was
Oh.
really nice and relaxing, except for when you were trying to cross the street when everybody was going home for siesta. But then it was a little dicey. But other than that, it was fun.
well, well, that's how Naples strikes me. Naples is it's fast paced, and this we were right downtown by the train station, and you really take your life in your own hands to cross the street.
Well, they
Uh,
kept telling us, because we had we had a because we were doing an ancestry thing. We had like somebody with us taking us around to some of the places, and they were like, "You just go. They'll stop." And I grew up in New York City. I worked in New York City, so crazy traffic with no
sure.
strangers to. But you lose it. You lose that after a while. You get a little less bold. And then I said to my guys, we have to make believe we're back in New York and just go. But the funny thing in Naples we found was, don't try and get out of the way of the Vespers. They'll work around you.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah, yeah. Just walk across the street, straight ahead, and they'll go around you. If you start trying to play dodgeball, then somebody's gonna get hit.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what we found out. And they're I mean they're really pretty good drivers, especially we had a guy who he had a big like Mercedes van, and he could maneuver those little tiny streets like I, I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know how he even did it.
no, I agree with you. They are very good drivers because for all that traffic and congestion and craziness, I never saw one accident. So they're
No,
very
no,
good.
yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, Lorraine, this has been a lot of fun for sure. Great stories. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it too. It was fun to reminisce and talk about my experiences in Italy. I appreciate.